You invited her, my mother-in-law spat, eyes widening as if she'd just spotted a rodent crawling across the white linen tablecloth. The words weren't whispered. They sliced through the soft hum of crystal glasses and clinking silverware like a snapped piano string. Half the room turned to look first at her, then at me, then back again, waiting for the punchline. No one laughed. She's not part of the family. Benjamin, not tonight, she knows that. And just like that, with a single sentence, she stripped me bare in front of a room full of silk dresses, tight smiles, and Chardonnay-soaked arrogance. It was supposed to be a family dinner, not just any dinner, his promotion celebration. My husband, Benjamin, had finally made senior partner at the law firm, and his mother had insisted on hosting the event at La Lumiere. The restaurant she adored because the waitstaff remembers your name and your wine. She'd rented out the private garden terrace and invited everyone except me. And yet I came, pie in hand, dressed in navy blue, the dress I always wore when I wasn't sure if I'd be seated near the door or the kitchen. Our daughter Ava had begged me to. She said, "Please, Mom, for me, just come for dessert." So I came. I had been standing quietly near the back, holding my lemon custard tart, his favorite, and waiting for someone to offer a chair, a plate, even a glance. None came. Instead, I got that moment, that sentence, that silence. Benjamin didn't speak. He adjusted his cufflinks, smiled at his boss, sipped his wine. My hands tightened around the ceramic dish until my knuckles turned white. My heart pounded. Not from rage, not yet, but from that kind of pain that's so familiar it becomes background noise. The kind you expect. "I'm sorry," the waiter said, softly. He looked at me like a man caught between worlds, loyalty to the guest list and decency to a stranger. "It's okay," I said, smiling faintly. "Could you ask the owner to come out for a moment?" He blinked. "The owner." "Yes," I said. "Tell him Julie's here." A whisper rippled through the air. A cousin furrowed her brow. One of the junior lawyers leaned toward Benjamin and murmured something. My mother-in-law tilted her head, amused. Now what she said, leaning into a laugh. "Is she going to sue her way into dessert?" The door near the kitchen swung open. He walked in. Aaron. Still wearing his apron, a towel slung over his shoulder. There was a flicker of confusion in his eyes at first. Then it melted into a grin. "Julie," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Why are you standing? Don't tell me no one got you a chair." The air shifted. The laughter faded. "She wasn't on the list," my mother-in-law said quickly, her voice tight now. "This is a private dinner." Aaron didn't look at her. He looked at me. "You want your usual table?" he asked. "No," I said, matching his smile. "I want this one." He stepped forward, pulled out the chair next to Benjamin's boss, and dusted it with his towel. "Be my guest." I placed the tart down, gently, like a crown. And when I sat, finally, Ava looked up from her seat and whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "Did they just mess with the wrong person?" I didn't answer. But the flicker in Aaron's eyes said it all. They had no idea what they'd just started. You don't just arrive at a moment like that being humiliated at a table where your own name was erased. It takes years. And little by little, you forget what you deserve. It started slow, almost quietly. I didn't walk into Benjamin's family. I tiptoed in, at first. His mother was polite, not warm, not cruel, just measured, like she was saving her energy for the final verdict. She called me Julie, dear, always with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I wanted to impress her, maybe even earn her approval. I mistook her silence for a test I hadn't passed yet. The wedding was the first clue. I remember standing with my best friend Carla in a satin gown I paid for myself because, as his mother said, the family has a very specific color palette. I wasn't part of it. My name wasn't on the seating chart either. I was listed as Benjamin's guest, even though I was the bride. The photographer didn't get a single shot of me with her. That was the beginning. Benjamin didn't notice, or maybe he did. But it was easier not to say anything. He was raised to smooth things over, not challenge them. That, I would learn, was his inheritance. Still, I stayed, because love makes you believe that maybe time will fill the gaps. When we had Ava, I thought everything would change. I thought holding her would melt the edges off his mother. And for a moment, I believed it. She came to the hospital with roses, called me darling, and even offered to help with the baby. What she meant, of course, was that I would help her by keeping Ava while she attended fundraisers, luncheons, and endless garden parties with her bridge club. I've sacrificed my best years for family. She told me once, now it's your turn. It's what good women do. I smiled, nodded. I was too exhausted to argue, too hopeful to push back. She'd show up in Chanel and ask if I could watch her poodle just for the weekend. The weekend turned into 5 days. The poodle hated kids. Benjamin said I was overreacting. I gave up my teaching offer to stay home, because she said, daycares are full of strangers, and strangers don't love babies. I didn't realize she didn't mean my strangers. She meant me. Still. I baked her lemon tarts every time she visited. I ironed Benjamin's shirts. I stayed late at firm events, shaking hands with people who called me the +1. Once. She forgot to include my name on a charity board I helped her build from scratch. I confronted her gently, trying to understand. Her answer, Julie? Some people just fit in more naturally. You wouldn't want to draw attention to yourself, would you? I smiled. I always smiled. Aaron was the only one who saw me. My cousin, the boy who grew up beside me in Grandma's tiny kitchen, learning how to make Sunday pot roast with real butter. He used to say I had the hands of a healer when I cooked. When his first restaurant failed, no one from his side helped. I gave him everything I had saved from years of wedding cakes and catering gigs, money I had planned to use for my own food truck. I'll pay you back, he said. But you should come in with me. Be my silent partner. I said yes. I stayed silent. Not because I was ashamed, but because I thought that if I did enough, if I was kind enough, patient enough, selfless enough, the people I married into would finally see me. They never did. Instead, they mocked Aaron behind his back, called him too rough around the edges for their events. My mother-in-law once said, La Lumiere was lovely before it changed ownership. She didn't know I owned part of it. Benjamin did. I told him. I still remember what he said. Just don't expect them to understand. Or care. They're not like us. I asked him just once, if he thought I deserved more than how his mother treated me. He stared at his phone and said, She means well. It's just her way. Her way included cutting me out of family photos, correcting how I spoke at dinner, calling my pie crusts too rustic, and never, not once acknowledging the life I'd built quietly, behind every success they clapped for. Even then, I stayed. Not for them. For Ava. Because Ava watched everything. And I didn't want her to think walking away was the only way to matter. I wanted her to see you could stand your ground with grace. But grace doesn't mean silence forever. Somewhere along the line, you stop asking to be let in. You stop knocking on a door that never opens. You realize the house never belonged to you, and maybe, just maybe, you were building something else all along, quietly, brick by brick, in your own name. And someday, they'll see it, whether you invite them to or not. The day I found the paperwork was the day I stopped lying to myself. It wasn't dramatic, not at first. No lightning crack, no big confrontation. Just a regular Tuesday morning. Benjamin had left early for a strategy meeting and left his laptop open. And for the first time in years. I didn't look away, I didn't snoop, I didn't dig, I simply clicked. There it was. A folder marked Personal. Inside a scanned draft of an asset separation agreement. My name wasn't on a single asset. Not the lake house gifted by his parents. Not the company stock held jointly by trust beneficiaries. Not even the joint checking account I had been quietly removed 2 months prior. I sat there, numb, rereading each clause. And then I saw it. Mutual agreement that no financial support will be required post-separation. Both parties have adequate means. Adequate means I hadn't worked full-time since Ava was born. I'd spent 15 years hosting, helping, homemaking, and while I did earn money from small catering gigs, they weren't enough to qualify as adequate means in any court. He was cutting me out, preparing to leave, silently, legally, without even telling me. And the worst part, it didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. It just felt familiar that afternoon. I called Aaron. I told him I wanted to increase my stake in the restaurant. Quietly. He didn't ask why. He simply said, "Whatever you need." He knew. He always knew. Still, I didn't tell him everything, not yet. Because I wasn't ready to burn the house down, not until they brought the gasoline. That weekend, Ava came home from a sleepover at her grandmother's looking confused. "Grandma said I shouldn't worry about stuff when you're gone," she said, swinging her backpack off one shoulder. She said Daddy and her are taking care of everything. Gone. The word sank like a stone. "What do you mean?" "Gone?" I asked. Ava shrugged. "Like, maybe after the summer?" She said it'll be smoother if I stay in one place. That was when I knew. They weren't just cutting me out, they were replacing me. I opened the drawer where I kept the backup keys. The lake house technically hers, but maintained by me was usually where she stashed things she didn't want lying around the city. I drove up the next morning, told the groundskeeper I was dropping off something for Ava. Inside her private study, tucked between photo albums and tea towels, was a thick envelope. Inside final drafts of a new will. Her will. She'd changed it 2 weeks prior, removed surviving spouses as automatic beneficiaries, left everything to Benjamin and his sister. There was a note attached. Best not to leave things to chance. I sat on her velvet settee and stared at that sentence until my vision blurred. She wasn't even subtle anymore. She was preparing for my absence as if I were a dying pet. The next day. She called me. It was the only time she'd called me directly in months. "I just want to make sure you're not planning to cause a scene next week," she said. Crisp and cold. "The dinner is very important for Benjamin's career. It's not the time to dredge up emotions." "Am I invited?" I asked. A pause. "Technically, yes. But I would suggest you attend with discretion." I almost laughed, but I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I made a list. I went through my files, my inbox. My shared folders found every document, every receipt, every contract signed under my name that they assumed I'd forgotten about. The loan I gave Aaron, the renovation permit for La Lumiere that I'd personally filed when the architect missed a deadline, the updated co-ownership clause Benjamin had signed before one of his conferences when I told him it was just a backup form for Aaron. He hadn't even read it. I printed everything, put it in a brown leather folder, and placed it inside my purse, right next to the lemon tart recipe Ava begged me to make. Then I waited. And when the dinner night arrived, I showed up. I wore the same navy blue dress I'd worn to our first firm gala. No sequins, no flashy makeup, just me. I wasn't on the official seating chart. I wasn't offered a chair. And when my mother-in-law said those words, "She's not part of the family. Not tonight," I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I simply said, "Could you ask the owner to come out?" because I knew what would happen next. I knew Aaron would walk through that door. I knew he would smile. I knew he would pull out the chair they denied me. But I also knew it wouldn't end there, because this time, I wasn't the one out of place. They were, and I had the proof to show it. Aaron didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The moment he stepped into the private garden of La Lumiere apron still tied, dish towel over one shoulder, the entire dinner party stilled. The chatter halted mid-sentence. Glasses froze mid-air, and even my mother-in-law's lips' mid-snide smile curled into something closer to confusion. She blinked. He smiled. "Julie," Aaron said, his voice low and even, but unmistakably firm. "I'm sorry. I just stepped away for 10 minutes and apparently people have forgotten whose house they're in." His eyes didn't leave mine, but his voice cut clearly enough for everyone to hear. the waiter, still standing awkwardly with the extra wine glass in his hand, quickly straightened his vest and tried to melt away. Aaron nodded toward the empty chair beside Benjamin's boss and gestured for me to sit. I didn't. Not yet. Because this moment, the one I had pictured in my mind 100 different ways, wasn't about sitting down anymore. It was about standing up. I looked at Benjamin first. His face had gone stiff, his jaw clenched. The very same face I had loved through years of early mornings. Half-slept nights, and quiet forgiveness. He didn't say a word. "Tell me," I said, still standing, voice level and calm. "Tell me exactly what you told them when I wasn't on the seating chart." When my name wasn't on the RSVP, no one answered, so I turned to my mother-in-law. Her face was the picture of restraint, eyebrows tight, lips trembling, that dangerous mix of control and panic, I believe, she said, after a long pause. "I mentioned this was an event for Legacy family, which, frankly, you've always kept a certain distance from." The silence afterward was the kind that made people wish they could disappear behind their wine glasses. I nodded. Legacy. That's an interesting word. Then I reached into my purse. The leather folder made a soft snapping sound as I opened it, laid it down beside the lemon tart I had brought, and slid out the first set of documents. Legacy, I repeated, placing the co-ownership deed for La Lumiere at the center of the table. "You mean like this? The 49% share I bought into this restaurant 5 years ago." Her mouth opened, then closed. Aaron stepped forward, gently lifting the paper. "She saved this place. Lillian. You remember the flood? The loan the bank wouldn't approve. Julie's the reason I didn't lose everything." No one spoke, not even Benjamin. I took out the next paper, dated and signed. A scanned copy of a transfer authorization bearing Benjamin's own signature. "This is the clause you didn't read," I said, holding it toward him. "The one where you ceded decision rights on our marital assets in exchange for full use of the trust's vacation property. You thought you were clever. You were just sloppy." Benjamin's face drained of color. I continued. "You remember that strategy meeting last month? The one that didn't exist. You removed me from our joint account the same day. I checked the timestamps. You left a digital trail even Ava could follow." A soft gasp rippled across the table. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. But I wasn't done. I reached into the folder again this time for the handwritten note I had found in the lake house. Paper creased and smug with age. Lillian's will. "I wasn't going to bring this up," I said, looking straight at her. "But when you start writing my obituary while I'm still making dessert for your son, it becomes relevant." The page fluttered as I unfolded it, reading aloud her line. "It's best not to leave things to chance." I laid it flat. "You removed me as a beneficiary. That's fine. It's your money, but don't pretend this dinner wasn't planned to signal something bigger. Don't pretend this wasn't about erasing me quietly." She tried to speak, couldn't, and then Aaron turned to the room. "I think," he said slowly, "we owe Julie a public apology. And a chair. And maybe a little credit." Someone at the far end of the table, the firm's managing partner. A quiet woman with short silver hair spoke next. "I wasn't aware this restaurant was hers," she said, folding her napkin carefully, "and I certainly didn't know Benjamin had excluded her from joint assets." Her tone was neutral, deadly neutral. Benjamin finally spoke. "Julie, we can talk privately. This isn't necessary." But it was. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming space that had always been mine. I finally sat down, not just in a chair, but in a position of power they had spent years denying me. The lemon tart was still in front of me, untouched. The sugar had started to glisten beneath the candles, for a moment. It looked like the only thing in the room still holding any warmth. My mother-in-law picked up her wine, her hand trembled, just slightly, and then it happened. A voice from 2 seats down, Mr. Hargraves, one of the firm's oldest clients, cleared his throat. I don't usually weigh in on family matters, he said slowly. But this seems unwise. Benjamin, if this is how you manage personal partnerships, I might have questions about how you manage business ones. Benjamin paled. It was subtle, but the dominoes had started across the table. One of the junior partners looked visibly uncomfortable. Another checked their phone. And at the far end, two colleagues whispered to each other behind a napkin. I didn't have to say anything else. The work was already done. I'd laid the truth bare. Now the room was reacting. Aaron, still standing beside me like the silent witness he'd always been, leaned in. You want me to clear the dessert course? No, I said, picking up a fork, calm and almost amused. Let them taste it. I cut into the tart. And suddenly, Ava, my daughter, my quiet shadow who had been watching all of this with wide, alert eyes leaned toward me, she whispered. Are they going to pretend it didn't happen? I smiled. They'll try. And just like that, Ava turned to her grandmother and said, Clear and steady, Grandma. You told me Mommy doesn't belong. But she helped build this place. She helped Dad. She helped Uncle Aaron, so how come she's the only one who's not embarrassed right now? You could hear a pin drop, even Lillian always poised. Always polished, couldn't think of a single thing to say. Her hands were still, her glass frozen halfway to her lips. Then she stood up. I think I need some air, she said, tight and brittle. No one followed her. Benjamin didn't even move. He looked at me, and for the first time, not with pity, not with resentment, with regret. But it was too late. I looked down at the tart, then back at the people who had spent years sitting at my table, eating my food, smiling in my kitchen while carving me out of their picture. I used to think I had to earn this seat, I said softly. Now I know it was always mine. I stood, this time, on my own terms. I took one last look at Benjamin, still shrinking inside the suit I had helped him pay for, back when the firm gave him nothing but promises. I won't raise my voice, I said. I won't ask for anything back, but I won't be erased, not anymore. I nodded to Aaron. He held the folder, now packed again with everything they didn't want to see. And as I walked past the head of the table, past the gold place cards and polished silver, someone, maybe one of the interns, maybe someone who knew better, started to clap, just once, then twice, and then silence again, not because they disagreed, but because they knew they had just witnessed something no one at that table would ever forget. The moment the woman they dismissed quietly dismantled their entire illusion without raising her voice, without breaking a single glass. And outside the terrace door, as the night air met my face, I heard Aaron call out gently, Julie, where are you going? I turned. Home, I said, wherever that is now. It began the very next morning, not with sirens, not with screaming, but with silence. Benjamin didn't come home after the dinner, and when he finally did, around 7 a.m., I was already up, not waiting, just up, standing in the kitchen, pouring coffee into a mug that had a small chip on the handle, his favorite one, though I doubted he even remembered. He stepped in like a man who expected a fight. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam a door. I just slid a thick envelope across the counter. What's this? He asked, eyes bleary. Your copy, I said, of everything I showed them last night. He looked at it like it might bite. You planned that. He muttered, Yes. I replied, quietly, while you were busy, making sure I disappeared. There was a pause. Then something strange happened. He looked relieved, like it was all out now, like he didn't have to pretend anymore. And yet, behind that relief, there was something else, fear, because what he didn't anticipate was what would come after. By noon, Benjamin's managing partner had called him in, apparently. Word had spread through the firm faster than wildfire. Not just that he'd omitted me from major financial decisions, but that he'd publicly humiliated the co-owner of a restaurant during a high-profile client event. La Lumiere was no longer just a place for cocktails. It was now a place everyone wanted to book. The story was buzzing across a dozen private group chats in the legal and socialite circles. the dinner where the wife turned the table. Benjamin's firm hated scandal, but what they hated even more was unpredictability. And suddenly, Benjamin had become both by the end of that week. They put him on indefinite leave officially to reflect on professional alignment. Unofficially, it was exile. But Benjamin wasn't the only one unraveling. Lillian, my mother-in-law, tried to maintain her composure. As she always did, she showed up to the Friday Bridge Club in full pearls, lipstick sharp enough to cut glass. She smiled, waved, poured tea, but no one asked her to host next week. No one asked about the dinner. And when she made her usual passive remark, something about certain people airing personal matters like dirty laundry, there was only stillness. Then someone quietly excused themselves. And then another. By the time the tray of lemon bars came around, Lillian sat alone. The silence followed her. The women who once clung to her opinions now kept their distance. Not because she'd been loud, but because the truth had been louder. They had seen the clip. Someone at the dinner had recorded the moment Aaron announced my ownership stake. It wasn't dramatic, just a 5-second video, but it had made its way into a private circle of socialites. And then someone leaked it further. The title read, "When the in-law you tried to erase owns the floor beneath your feet." The post had no tags, no names, but everyone knew. Lillian didn't return my calls after that, not that I expected her to. I had nothing left to say, and she had nowhere left to hide. The silence between us had always existed. It just no longer wore pearls and lipstick. Erin told me she came to the restaurant once. Not to eat, just to sit, very early in the morning. In the corner near the window where she used to host her luncheons. She didn't order anything, he said. Just sat with her purse in her lap, watched the staff for a while, then left. No one greeted her. No one asked if she wanted her usual... By that point, she had already been dropped from the fundraising board she chaired for 15 years. Quietly, no statement, just replaced. The world that had once bowed to her etiquette was now too afraid of her history. You could see it in the way people paused when she entered a room, not in awe out of discomfort. Meanwhile, Benjamin was unraveling faster than he knew how to cover. He filed a motion to have our post-nuptial agreements reviewed. He claimed I had manipulated his trust, that I had used insider knowledge to shift asset control. But it was too late. The paper trail was too clean. His signature was too clear. And my lawyer, an old friend of Aaron's, a woman who had once catered her own wedding and remembered I brought handmade baklava, filed everything with surgical precision. Benjamin had always counted on two things, silence and power. He lost both. When the hearing came, I wore a simple charcoal gray suit, no jewelry, no flair, just clarity. He looked at me once across the courtroom, just once, and for the first time. He didn't see a woman trying to keep him. He saw a woman who had already let go. The judge upheld every clause. I retained my restaurant stake, my portion of the joint assets, and most importantly, my independence. Benjamin was ordered to pay a settlement, modest, but symbolic. Lillian never showed up to the hearing. She sent flowers. I donated them to the local nursing home. When all of it was over, I walked out of the courthouse not with a sense of victory, but with a strange kind of quiet, like when a storm has passed and the world is waiting to exhale. There were no cheers, no applause, just me and Ava standing at the curb, holding my coat. Was it scary? She asked, eyes searching mine. I nodded. Yes, but necessary. She leaned against me. I'm glad you didn't yell. I smiled. Me too, because sometimes justice doesn't come with noise. Sometimes it comes with clarity, with knowing that you never needed to scream to be heard. You only needed to stop whispering. That day, I walked away from everything that once made me small. I didn't burn it down. I simply turned my back. And they never looked quite as tall again. The mornings feel different now. Not louder, not even brighter, just lighter. It's in the way sunlight spills across my kitchen floor before the world remembers to be busy. In the quiet clinking of mugs as I choose my favorite cup, the one with the little chip, and the words, "strong enough," fading on the side. Ava picked it out for me last Christmas, said it reminded her of me. She wasn't wrong. I make my coffee slower these days, not rushed, not automatic. It brews while I breathe. I sip it by the window that faces east, where the light hits first. I used to rush through mornings like they owed me something, scrambling to meet other people's needs before my own. Now, I let the light find me. The house is smaller, not in square footage, but in noise, in obligations, in people who walk through the front door expecting something from me without ever asking if I have anything left to give. I moved out 3 weeks after the settlement. Found a small rental, nothing fancy, but with a backyard just big enough for herbs and wildflowers. The first thing I did was plant mint. The second was rosemary. It's strange how peace smells like something familiar you didn't realize you missed. Sometimes Ava stays the weekend. We bake in silence. She mixes. I roll. We laugh at the mess and don't bother cleaning right away. We watch movies we've seen 5 times. And when it's late, we sit on the back steps, wrapped in a blanket, her head on my shoulder. "Do you think they ever really knew you?" she asked once. I thought about it, and then I said, I think I wanted them to, more than I wanted to know myself. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The truth had already landed. It took me years to understand that wanting to belong doesn't mean giving parts of yourself away. That being the bigger person shouldn't mean being the invisible one. And that real family, doesn't measure your value by how quiet you are when they ignore you. Sometimes I still hear echoes of who I used to be. The woman who baked extra pies to win approval, who stood at the edge of parties hoping someone would pull out a chair, who memorized everyone's preferences but forgot her own. I think of her gently. I don't hate her. She was just tired. Just trying. Just hoping, one more time, that kindness would be enough. But now, I know better. Last Sunday, I stood in the little garden behind the house, barefoot in the grass, holding a mug warm from the inside. There was dew still on the mint. Ava had painted small markers for each herb: basil, thyme, sage, like little flags of who we were becoming. "Mom," she said suddenly, "you seem taller." I laughed, but then I paused, because it wasn't about height. She wasn't talking about inches. She was talking about presence, and maybe for the first time in years. I had truly arrived in my own life. I no longer check my phone waiting for messages that never come. I no longer flinch when I walk into spaces I once had to earn. I don't need to be invited anymore. I carry my place with me these days. I cook what I like, lemon tart. Yes, but with sea salt in the crust. Just how I love it. I wear the earrings I always thought were too much. I hum when I fold laundry. I dance when no one's looking. I am not bitter. I am not angry. I am simply free. And if you are someone watching this who has ever been silenced, overlooked, dismissed especially by the very people you tried to love, let me tell you something quietly, like a secret between friends. You don't have to earn love that's real. You don't have to apologize for taking up space you've already filled with your effort, your loyalty, your years of invisible giving. And if someone still can't see you, that says everything about them. Not you. You are not hard to love. You were just standing in front of the wrong eyes for too long. So if you're still holding your breath in someone else's house, someone else's story, maybe today's the day you start writing your own. Even if it begins with a chipped mug. Even if it's as quiet as mint in the morning. You deserve joy that doesn't ask you to shrink. If this story touched something in you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Maybe a sister, a friend, maybe even your past self. And if you're still finding your voice, you're not late. You're just beginning. Leave me a comment if you've ever had to reclaim your place, or if you're still trying. I see you. We see each other now. And if no one else says it tonight, I'm proud of you.